and welcome to week 2's video. This week we're reading The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas by Ursula Guin, and we're continuing in this first unit to gather different tools of analysis to be able to approach our longer texts with different strategies to consider what's going on and to actively engage with how different ideas about good and bad societies and what's valuable within them, to draw our conclusions, right? There's a lot for you all to interpret, and we're trying to gather a number of different avenues and tools in order to aid that interpretation. So with The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas, the first thing to consider is that we're in a different form than with, for instance, Moore's Utopia. Okay, so and that's one of the main things we're going to be thinking about this week. So Ursula Guin's our author, but we're not going to be considering the text in terms of the historical and personal context of Ursula Le Guin. I really encourage you, though, to look into Ursula Le Guin and other writings that she's done. She's a powerhouse, one of the most prolific science fiction and speculative fiction authors of the 20th century. So while she is a badass, we're going to be focusing on the presentation of this one text while setting her context aside. Okay, so one thing that I hope you notice while reading The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas is that it's told as a story directly to the readers. Okay, so in Utopia, for instance, the narrative is as a dialogue between two individuals. In other stories that you might have read, sometimes it's told from a character's perspective, right? So, for instance, it might be like, I woke up this morning, I made breakfast, then I saved the world, right? So that's from a first person's perspective. Stories can also be told from a third person omniscient perspective, where you just get somebody who's telling you what happened in terms of, so Gandalf did X that day. I don't know, he turned into a different kind of wizard. I didn't read Lord of the Rings, that's a bad example to come up with, right? But somebody tells you without addressing the audience as you, just telling you what's going on from each character's perspective. The other way you could be told a story is from a character's perspective. I already said that one. Okay, cool. The way that The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas is telling you is as if I was telling you a story and I was aware that I had an audience, right? I use the word you. It's how you might have been told bedtime stories growing up. But we have an author that could be separate from Le Guin, right? You're being told about Omelas, the city, and what goes on there, okay? So this is one of the major reasons we chose this narrative, this short story. We're considering what choosing this form of storytelling does for our interpretation, okay? Because these forms of narration aren't just neutral. They allow the author to convey different styles of storytelling, and they do different things to the reader, right? So this week we're focusing on how authors are active in their conveying of information, okay? So a few thoughts about this before we go on to content. Okay, so what does having this type of storytelling do and allow us to see as we're reading? So because the author is saying, hey, notice this, I'm going to tell you this about the city and tell you this about how the different characters exist in the city, we can see different focuses. It highlights what a particular person's perspective finds more and less relevant, okay? So instead of having the idea that we have an all-knowing narrator that tracks different characters throughout the story, and says, I'm just going to go with it. Here's what Gandalf is doing right now. Here's Frodo. Here's Sam. There's an implicit context with that narrator that you're getting everything important that's happening, right? It's tracking the action, so to speak, throughout the novel. When someone's telling you a story, there's an implicit perspective, right? So if I told you the story of my day, it's implied that I'm telling you the relevant stuff of my day, but you know that I've laden it with meanness, right? So if a all-knowing narrator told you the story of my day, that's kind of more reliable often, right? So when an author decides to tell a story from this perspective, we can ask critically, why did the author decide, why is the storyteller emphasizing some things rather than others? And especially with stories that are either utopian or dystopian, or are emphasizing what's valuable or problematic about a society, we should be questioning why the storyteller is saying some things explicitly about the society, which things the author, the storyteller rather, is leaving open to interpretation, and which things the storyteller is like, no, this is what is the case, right? Should we believe the storyteller that that actually is a reasonable thing, okay? So we really can embody somebody telling you a story and engage critically with what that implied perspective is telling you, okay? So that's the theme of this week. That's why I chose this text, is to try to get comfortable with this tool. Thinking critically about what the author is doing to their audience, right? So thinking of the author as an active thing engaging with the audience, especially because it's a storytelling author. We know that they know they have an audience. So what are they doing to their audience, right? So with the ones who walked away from Omelas specifically, here are the things to kind of think about given this form, okay? The storyteller's telling you about a city, right? What things does the storyteller consider important about that city, right? Which things do they leave open to the audience, and which things are they specific about? They need to specify. So some things are left out because of this focus, and some things are absolutely explicit. Also, I want us to think critically about how, by telling a story, you're shaping reader expectations. So when you tell a story to an audience, you want them to come along with you, right? In telling a story to your friends, you want them to think your conclusion is the reasonable conclusion, right? You'd rather them not think that 5 other options were also reasonable conclusions for your story. That undermines your actions at the end, right? So think about how much this storytelling does that. Maybe it doesn't very much, maybe it does, right? But by choosing this form, more so like possibly than other forms, you allow for more focused storytelling. And that means that there might be missing stuff, right? You can lead your reader a little more effectively. So when you're reading this, think critically, try to consider what the form of the text adds to conveying things about a city and how people engage with that city, okay? So this is the video about the focus of this week, what kind of active engagement I want us to do with this text, right? That's what these first few weeks are aimed at, gathering some tools of interpretation when we get to our longer narratives. So as you read this, what's explicitly described, what is open for you to fill in, and what's being presented as the reasonable conclusions, and kind of critically engage with that, okay? So this is the tool of the week video, and we'll critically consider, well, I'll engage more with the content of the story in the next one. Okay.